So hello everybody, my name is Sheehan. I'm a psychotherapist, a CBT practitioner and a clinical supervisor. And I've been asked to come and talk to you today about the whole area of mental health and stress at this particular time as we're going through unusual circumstances around the pandemic. So I've been in this area of work for the past 25 years, but I didn't start out doing this type of work. It was actually a personal family tragedy around my mother that actually put me into this type of work, because it brought up a lot of questions about why things happen to people and why things happen in families. So at the moment in Ireland, we're going through, as I said, very unusual circumstances, very unusual times, and this has seen a noticeable increase in people's stress levels. So I have some notes here in front of me which I'll be referring to every so often, because I have a few things that I want to talk about around the whole area of stress. So when we look at the whole issue of stress, it's all part of our lives, and stress can either be a good thing or a bad thing. Now, in terms of good things, stress is good for us because it motivates us to be prepared for certain things. Like, say, if we were studying for an exam, or maybe if there was a life goal that we wanted to achieve, stress motivates us to take action towards those things, right? But on the other side of it, stress can become bad if it's prolonged and becomes chronic, and it affects every part of our lives. So sometimes people tell us that stress is only all in the mind. And whatever way we're looking at the world, through whatever particular lens, that can be true. But it's also more than that. It's also in the body as well. Because if you notice when you're stressed, it can have a particular effect on different functions of the body as well. So just maybe for a minute, just take maybe a short breath, and just, when you're stressed, where does it show up in your body? For lots of us, it can be in the tummy. If we're anxious about something, we can have butterflies. For some people, it's shortness of breath, or maybe finding it hard to breathe. For some people, it can be constant migraines. And these are all the physical manifestations of stress. So when we talk about stress as a body response, there's certain things, I suppose, that come into play around all that area of stress in the body. So if it's allowed to continue, it may eventually lead to more serious problems, such as adrenal burnout, when our health is affected. So it all goes back to our evolution, really. So when human beings first walked the earth, we had only a very small brain. And the task of that brain was to find food, find shelter, and to stay safe. And there was a particular part of the brain known as the amygdala that was operating highly in those times. Now, the interesting thing is, even though our brains have evolved over many, many centuries, we've learned to use language, we've learned to use tools, we've put people on the moon, and we've learned all these new to use technology. The primitive brain is still very much evident in our everyday lives, because there is a part of that brain known as the amygdala, right? And the amygdala is a bit like a security guard in a hotel or in a shopping center, constantly walking around, making sure everything's okay, right? And that amygdala in the brain is constantly scanning the environment. And if it feels that there's a threat or a danger, it will flood the body with hormones and with chemicals to keep us prepared. And those chemicals, most of you will know what they are. They're adrenaline and cortisol, and they keep the body prepared. Now, the interesting thing about the amygdala is it doesn't differentiate threats on the outside or threats on the inside. So for instance, if you're walking down the road and you saw someone following you, then you'd know that there's something, a threat here. So you quicken your pace and you get out into safety. Now, for instance, if you're watching a film and you know, maybe a horror film or a film where there's a lot of intense activity, you know that you're watching actors, but your brain, the amygdala part of your brain, doesn't know that. So just try and watch a horror film on your own and see what happens. There's a lot of anxiety and nervousness, and we have a lot of reactions in the body. And sometimes somebody jumps out from behind a wall or a door, we get an awful fright. So that's what the amygdala does. It prepares us for fight or flight. So as I said, even thinking about stressful situations can cause our body to be flooded with these chemicals, right? So as human beings, right, we all suffer from things that happen, like disappointments, illness, hurt, death of close loved ones or friendships. And these are all part of the human condition, and this is known as primary suffering. And it's something that we can't escape. We all will encounter primary suffering at some stage in our lives. And as I said, it's part of being human. Now, there's a second level of suffering that we add to the primary suffering, and this is known as secondary suffering. It's a second layer that we add to the primary suffering. So, for instance, you might have somebody who might be working for 25 years and suddenly they're made redundant, right? It's a big shock, they never saw it coming. So that's the primary suffering, the fact that they've been made redundant after working in a position for 25 years. Now, the secondary suffering onto that is, oh, I'll never get another job. Sure, who will employ me at this stage of my life? So that's what we call secondary suffering. And it can add lots of stress to people's lives. And I suppose in the work that I do as a psychotherapist and as a CBT practitioner, there are four main areas that can lead to secondary suffering. And these are known as rumination, anticipatory anxiety, self-criticism, and social comparisons. Now, there are other things as well that add to mental health issues, but for the most of the things that I see showing up in my practice is rumination, anticipatory anxiety, self-criticism, and social comparisons. Now, I'll go through each of those so that you'll have an understanding of what they are, because a lot of the things that help us with our stress levels is to understand what actually is happening in our bodies and in our brains at the time. So, rumination is like something that we've done, right? Or maybe something that we've said. So we're looking back into the past. It could be yesterday, it could be an hour ago, it could be yesterday, a day, 2 days ago, a week ago, a month ago, or even 3 or 4 years ago. So we're looking back and we're saying to ourselves, oh, why did I say that? What will people think of me? Oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. Or why did I make that decision back then? Why didn't I take that job when it was offered to me? You know, why did I marry that person when I should have married another person? Why did I stay in Ireland? Why didn't I leave and go to another country? So all these things we're ruminating on things that have happened. So we're ruminating on our past. And a lot of the time when we do that, it keeps us back in the past, right? And when we're back in the past, we have no control over what happened in the past. It's gone. We can't change it, really. We can change our attitude towards it, of course, but when things have happened, they've happened, and we can't, as I said, change the fact that they've happened. So when we're ruminating, we're back in the past. We're not in the present moment. The present moment is where everything is happening in the now. It's where we're living in the now, fully in the now. And it's where all relationships are happening. Good things and bad things are all happening in the now. But when we're ruminating, we're not living in the now at all. So the other thing that I said was anticipatory anxiety. So anticipatory anxiety, by its very name, will give you a hint of what it is. It's looking ahead into the future and anticipating things going wrong. So when you're maybe looking ahead and saying, oh my God, I better do this in case. So a classic example of anticipatory anxiety is people going on holidays. They love going on holidays, but the fact that they have to take a plane or an airplane ride to the destination brings up a lot of anxiety, because they're wondering, oh my God, what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if we have turbulence? What happens if the plane crashes? So that produces a lot of anxiety for them. And as I said, it's about looking into the future and anticipating things that could go wrong, right? So again, when we're looking into the future like that, we're not in the present moment, right? As I said, everything happens in the present moment. All of life is happening there right now in this present moment. Now, the decisions we make in the present moment can affect the future, or the decisions that we don't make in the present moment can also affect the future, but they cannot affect the past, right? So there are two things, and we tend to go from one to the other. Some people are more prone to rumination, some people are more prone to anticipatory anxiety, right? And I often say as a joke, people who are prone to rumination would be very good, probably historians, or they'd probably be very good at, cataloguing historical events. People who are prone to anticipatory anxiety would make very good health and safety officers, because they can see things going wrong even before they happen. So another area that shows up quite a lot is this whole area of, as I said, self-criticism, right? Self-criticism is endemic in our culture, right? And that is because of our upbringing, the culture we were brought up in. And self-criticism is like what we call the internal judge, that's always judging everything we do, or everything that we don't do, of course, as well. So it's there on our shoulder, telling us all the time, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not bright enough, you're not attractive enough, you're not intelligent enough, you're not good enough for anything. So it stops us from taking risks that would be good for us. Like when I say that, it's like that we live inside a comfort zone. It's like our little bubble, and everything is kind of safe there. And sometimes when something attracts us, maybe there's something that we want to do, maybe change jobs, maybe there's somebody that we might be interested in, we'd like to ask them out. We have to take a little bit of a risk to do that. So when we move outside our comfort zone, it helps us to grow, right? It helps us to expand our cycle, our circle of influence and our circle of experience. But sometimes our little judge that's on our shoulder all the time is telling us, no, don't try that. What will happen if it fails? Everyone will be saying, oh, look, you're so stupid. And it's always there to keep us in check, right? Now, the function of it, right, it develops at a very young age. The function of it is to keep us safe, right? And that's all very well when we're small children, because we want to stay safe. But as we get older, we want to experience new things and try new things. And sometimes it's good not to listen to that internal judge. But it's very difficult because it's always there. It's there since we were very small children. Now, we can't get rid of that internal judge. But the good news is we can lower the volume. We can lower the volume so that that little internal voice doesn't affect us so much, especially if we're doing something that's beyond our comfort zone, maybe doing something like public speaking. Like for instance, here this morning, as I was coming in, my internal judge was picking away at me saying, oh, no, you'll never do this, you won't be able to perform in front of the camera. But look, I'm doing it. I'm aware the internal judge is there, but I'm not listening to him, right? So another one of those little things that cause us anxiety and stress is what we call social comparisons, right? It's a big one in modern Ireland today because of Facebook and all the social media. So what we're doing with social comparisons is we're looking out at people in our world and we're saying to them, or we're saying to ourselves, how come they have a better life than us? How come they have a better job than us? How come they're making more money than us and I'm working harder than them? What am I doing wrong? And as I said, Facebook can be a big challenge especially for young people, because we're looking at Facebook and we're saying, how come they have more friends than I have? Or how come their life seems so much better than mine? The fact is, it's not true. We all, as I said at the start, we all suffer, right? So we have moments of having good times, and we also have moments of having bad times, or times when we're maybe down, or we're suffering because of something that's happened. But it's not continuous, right? But what happens with social media is it gives us the perception that people are out there enjoying themselves and that they have no troubles or no problems. So they're the things, as I said, that can add stress to our lives, right? Now, when we indulge in what we call this way of thinking, we're never in the present moment, right? Because as I said to you, everything happens in the present moment. The good stuff and the bad stuff all happen in the present moment. And I suppose really, if we can stay in the present moment as much as we can, then chances are we have more control over our lives, right? So these ways of thinking, as I said, rumination, anticipatory anxiety, internal criticism, and social comparisons, when we engage in those ways of thinking, they become habits. They become habitual. And eventually what happens is they become so ingrained in our brain that we actually don't realize we're thinking that way. They become kind of unconscious thinking habits, right? And our brain, as I said, is a wonderful machine, right? But it's there to protect us, right? But also it can be our worst enemy as well. Because what happens with these habits of thinking is they become ingrained in our brains and they form what we call neural pathways, right? So we don't actually realize that we're thinking this way, right? So if I can describe what a neural pathway is, right? Just imagine you have a clothesline in your back garden, right? On top of the grass, lovely grassy lawn, and you have your clothesline. And every day you go back and forth, putting clothes on the line and taking clothes off the line. And you're doing that for months, weeks and months and maybe years. And one day you're looking out your back window and you look at the grass and you say, oh my God, the grass is in an awful state. And what you see is the grass is worn because you're walking back and forth, back and forth. So that's what a neural pathway is like. It wears as a path in our brain structure, right? And you're back and forth, it becomes a habit. And you realize, hang on a sec now, if I want my lawn to look well, I need to think of another way to put my clothesline or go in another direction. So you decide one day, okay, I'll go the other way. So if you go the other way, eventually what happens is the lawn repairs itself again. And that's what happens in our brain as well. For a long, long time, scientists thought that once our brain was set, there was no change. But in the last few years, neuroscience has discovered that actually the brain can repair itself, right? So when we make, I suppose, conscious effort to change how we think about things, then our brain will set up new neural pathways, right? And that's I suppose, the work in that is, first of all, to become aware that we're thinking this way, and also to create a practice of changing our habits of thinking, right? So think of the clothesline, as I said, again, right? So when you become aware that the grass is all withered and trampled on, that's when you can make a change. So you change by going a different direction, right? So we can do that with our brain as well. So we do that by we become aware by giving ourselves space, right? And what I'm emphasizing here is it's important that when we become aware of our habits, that we do that with compassion, that we don't criticize ourselves for what we've done, because these habits have been set up at a very early age, and there are ways of survival. And that's, as children, that's how we survive in the world. We create these habits of thinking. So the important thing is, when we become aware, this is how we think, we must never, ever criticize ourselves, because that only sets up, again, the internal judge again. Oh, I'm stupid, or I can't do this properly. So how do we create awareness? We create awareness by, first of all, noticing how we are in our bodies. Right? So if you can do a check-in every day about how you are in your body, How is your breathing? How's your heart rate? Because the brain, the function of the brain is to monitor all that, right? Monitors your heart rate and your breathing and your blood flow. And then when it's satisfied that all that's in place, then it kind of, okay, everything's fine there. But then it looks for something else to be anxious about. So that's the function of the brain. The function of the brain is to keep us safe, right? So when we check in our bodies, if we can make a habit of this every day, then that will lead to us becoming more aware of what happens when we're stressed. So as I said earlier, for lots of people it can show up as maybe tummy troubles or racing heart or sweating or sweaty palms or trembling hands or migraines. So when we tune into our bodies, then we can become aware of, okay, how am I feeling at this moment now? In this present moment, how am I feeling, right? So it's about taking a deep breath and saying, okay, right, I know, I'm maybe a slight touch of a headache maybe. What has caused it? Maybe I'm worried about something that's coming up. Maybe I'm worried about a presentation or maybe about a meeting that I'm due to have. So when we start developing a practice of being mindful of our breathing, then that begins to open the doorway to awareness. Viktor Frankl, one of the survivors of the Auschwitz concentration camp, had a particular saying and he always said that between stimulus and response, we have a space. And in that space, we always have a choice, right? So awareness will give us that choice, right? Between stimulus and response, we have a space. In that space, we always have a choice. So awareness will give us that space. So how do we develop awareness? Okay. There are many different ways, and it's very different for lots of people. For some people, it can be, so if you just bear with me a second, I'll just look at my notes. As I said, take a moment to switch off every day, take a deep breath, and just center yourself in the present moment, right? For some people, it can be listening to music. And I don't mean up heavy or beat music now, because that actually increases the cortisol levels as well. But soft, gentle music, that'll soften your breathing and slow your breathing as well. Going for a walk in nature. Nature is a great balm for stress. Reading a poem, because that brings us back into the body again. Makes us think about, what is the poet telling me? Right? For some people, it can be lighting a candle. For some people, it could be saying a prayer. All these things that make us stop and come into the present moment. As I said, this is where all life is happening. And this is where we actually have most control, believe it or not, when we're in the present moment. When we're in the past, we don't. When we're anticipating things going on in the future, we don't, right? So if you can take a time each day, just take a deep breath. And if you can increase that maybe to 2 or 3 times a day, then you'll find your stress levels and anxiety starting to decrease. So we'll just, by way of finishing maybe, just do a quick little, maybe meditation that'll help us to center into the moment. So wherever you are, if you're standing or if you're sitting, even though it's better to be sitting in case you fall down, just put your feet on the ground and take 1 or 2 deep breaths. And sometimes it helps to put your hand on your heart, and you'll notice that your heartbeat slows the more you take a deep breath. Because a lot of the time when we're stressed, we only breathe from our chest up. But in order to live fully, we need a full breath. So when you put your hand on your heart, you become aware of your heartbeat. And then the more deeper you can take your breath, the heartbeat will slow. And that's always very good, to slow our heartbeat. It's always very good. So, because that's sending a message to the brain as well to say that, yeah, things are fine, we're relaxed, we're starting to relax. So when you do that each day and increase it maybe to 2 or 3 times a day, then that will help you with your stress levels. It also helps, what I've been saying to people lately as well, because there's so much bad news out there, is to sit at home in the evening, maybe with your family or your friends, and to watch a comedy. And, you know, when we do that, we have a laugh about what's happening on the screen. Life, it can take the seriousness out of life, and that is so important. It's very important for couples nowadays to sit and watch a comedy. And I've been telling couples that, you know, take some time for yourselves in the evening. It doesn't have to be every evening, but maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and watch a comedy. And that will help with stress levels as well. So I think that's about the end of the presentation. And from my part, I want to wish you all well. And I suppose a common phrase that we use nowadays is to stay safe and stay stress-free as well. Thank you for listening.